Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and support me. The airship cut through the sky like a sleek, ancient bird, its metallic hull gleaming in the sunlight. Beneath it stretched an endless sea of clouds, pale and shimmering like the surface of an alien ocean. Lyra stood at the ship's bow, eyes squinting against the glare, her fingers brushing the cold metal of the railing. She had read the old texts, had pored over the maps and records, and after all these years, they were finally nearing Aeolis, the city in the sky. "You're sure this is the place?" Terran's voice came from behind her, his tone laced with skepticism. The pilot wasn't the type to be awed by legend, but even he had to admit, the floating ruins of an ancient city held a certain allure. Lyra nodded without looking back. "I've never been more certain in my life." She felt the hum of the ship's engines beneath her feet, the steady vibration filling her with a quiet anticipation. The journey had been long, but the reward would be worth it. A city lost to time, forgotten by history, now only a whispered myth among scholars and treasure hunters alike. If the ancient records were to be believed, Aeolis was once the most advanced civilization on the planet, a place where magic and technology had been fused into one, where knowledge beyond imagining was stored within its towers and archives, and it had fallen. How or why, no one knew. But they were here to find out. Terran stepped up beside her, his hand resting casually on the hilt of the knife strapped to his belt. "We'll be at the coordinates in 10 minutes. You might want to prepare yourself. This place could be a real letdown." Lyra smiled faintly. "I doubt that." Behind them, Kai and Dr. Celine were deep in conversation. The young mage in training, with his bright, eager eyes and restless energy, was practically bouncing on his toes. "I've studied all the arcane theories about the city," Kai was saying. "If even a fraction of the magic there still works, we could be looking at spells lost to time." Dr. Celine, ever the scientist, gave a noncommittal nod. "We'll see what we find. Just remember, there's no guarantee we'll make it back out if the city's defenses are still active." Lyra took a deep breath and turned away from the view, her heart quickening. Aeolis was out there, hidden in the mist, waiting to be discovered. As the ship descended through the cloud layer, the ruins of Aeolis emerged like the skeletal remains of a giant. Towering spires, crumbling but still defiant, pierced the sky, their surfaces scarred by time. Floating platforms hovered in midair, some connected by fragile bridges, others isolated and adrift. The city seemed both ancient and alien, its architecture a strange blend of sharp angles and flowing curves, as if built by hands that understood both the mechanical and the mystical. They touched down on a broad platform near the outskirts of the city, the ship's landing gear settling with a soft thud. Lyra and the others disembarked, their footsteps echoing eerily in the silence. "It's even more incredible than I imagined," Kai whispered, his eyes wide as he took in the sight. Lyra didn't respond, her attention fixed on a towering structure in the distance, a massive, pyramid-like building with intricate carvings that seemed to shimmer faintly in the dim light. "That's our destination," she said, her voice barely more than a breath. Terran adjusted the straps of his pack, eyes scanning the horizon warily. "Let's move. The sooner we get this done, the better." They made their way into the city, the silence around them heavy and oppressive. There were no signs of life, no movement except for the occasional flicker of light from the ancient machines that still hummed faintly in the background. Every now and then, Lyra caught a glimpse of something out of the corner of her eye, a shadow, a flicker of motion, but when she turned to look, there was nothing there. Hours passed as they navigated the maze-like streets of Aeolis, each corner revealing new wonders and dangers. The city was a puzzle, and every step felt like unlocking a piece of its long-buried secrets. The deeper they ventured, the more Lyra began to sense that they were being watched. "Anyone else feel that?" Kai muttered, rubbing his arms as if trying to shake off a chill. "It's like the city's alive." Dr. Celine was the first to confirm their suspicions. Her scanner beeped erratically, and she frowned at the screen. "Something's moving out there. Just beyond our sensors." "Fantastic," Terran grumbled. "Exactly what we needed, ghosts." "They're not ghosts," Lyra said firmly. "But we need to be cautious. This city was designed to defend itself. We might not be alone." As they approached the pyramid structure, the air grew thick with an energy Lyra could feel in her bones. Magic, old and powerful, swirled around them like a tangible force, making the hair on the back of her neck stand on end. "We're close," she whispered. "The heart of the city, it's in there." They entered the pyramid, stepping through a grand archway that led into a vast chamber lined with strange, crystalline structures. At the center of the room was a massive, glowing orb, pulsating with an eerie, blue light. Lyra felt a thrill of excitement rush through her. This was it, the key to Aeolus, the source of its power. "We need to be careful," Dr. Celine warned, her eyes fixed on the orb. "This much concentrated energy, it could be unstable." But before they could take another step, the room trembled, and the ground beneath them shook violently. From the shadows, a massive figure emerged, a golem, towering and imposing, its eyes glowing with the same blue light as the orb. Its movements were slow but deliberate, each step sending tremors through the floor. "Run!" Terran shouted, but the golem was already upon them. The battle was frantic, chaotic. The golem swung its massive arms, smashing the crystalline structures and sending shards flying in every direction. Lyra and the others scattered, ducking and dodging as the creature advanced. Kai hurled spells at it, but the magic seemed to bounce off its metallic skin, harmless. "It's immune to magic," he shouted, panic rising in his voice. Terran fired his blaster, the shots barely leaving scorch marks on the golem's armor. "We can't fight this thing," he yelled. "We have to shut it down." Dr. Celine shouted over the chaos. "It's powered by the orb. If we can sever the connection, how?" Lyra demanded, ducking as the golem's fist smashed into the floor where she had just been standing. "I don't know," Celine admitted, her voice trembling. "But we have to try." With no other options, Lyra made a desperate dash toward the orb. The golem's attention shifted to her, its glowing eyes locking on her as she sprinted across the chamber. Terran provided covering fire, distracting the creature just long enough for Lyra to reach the orb's pedestal. The orb was pulsating, its light intensifying as she approached. Lyra could feel its power radiating through the air, almost overwhelming in its intensity. She hesitated, unsure of what to do. Could she destroy it? Could she even touch it? "Lyra, now!" Terran's voice snapped her out of her thoughts. Without thinking, she reached out and placed her hands on the orb. Instantly, a surge of energy shot through her, flooding her senses with visions, images of Aeolus in its prime, its people thriving, their magic and technology intertwined in perfect harmony. And then, the rift, the tear between dimensions that had brought it all crashing down. Lyra's hands trembled as the flood of visions surged through her mind. The images were vivid, overwhelming, a society that had reached the pinnacle of achievement only to be undone by their own hubris. She saw the people of Aeolus unlocking the power of the dimensional rift, using it to fuel their machines, enhance their magic, and extend their lives. But the energy they had harnessed was volatile, corrupting everything it touched. It had twisted their technology, poisoned their minds, and eventually tore their world apart. She felt the orb's energy pulsing through her, tempting her with promises of power and knowledge. She could understand why the people of Aeolus had succumbed to it. With this energy, she could unlock secrets beyond her wildest dreams. She could bring an age of prosperity to her world, end suffering, cure disease, solve problems that had plagued civilizations for centuries. But there was a darkness to it. Lyra could feel the same malevolent force that had destroyed Aeolus whispering in the back of her mind. It wasn't just power, it was chaos, raw and untamed. And if she let it in, it would consume her the way it had consumed this once great city. The golem's footsteps echoed behind her, shaking her from the trance. The creature was closing in fast, its glowing eyes locked on her with unrelenting precision. Her pulse raced, and she could feel the sweat dripping down her brow. The weight of the decision pressed down on her. Lyra. Terran's voice rang out across the chamber, snapping her back to the moment. He was holding off the golem with everything he had, but it wouldn't be long before it overpowered him. Kai and Dr. Celine were working frantically on the sidelines, but there was no time to figure out an elaborate plan. She had to make a choice that in an instant. She made her decision. With a sharp intake of breath, Lyra drew on the orb's power, not all of it, just enough to sever the connection between the golem and the energy source. She focused her thoughts, pushing the destructive energy away from herself and back into the orb, forcing it to withdraw from the massive guardian. The golem halted mid-stride, its glowing eyes flickering. For a moment, the creature seemed to waver, as if unsure of its purpose. Then, with a low, mechanical groan, it collapsed into a heap of metal and stone, its immense frame crashing to the ground. Lyra stumbled back, the power of the orb fading as she pulled her hands away. She felt drained, as though the energy had taken a piece of her with it. Terran was by her side in seconds, grabbing her arm and pulling her away from the pedestal. His expression was grim, his usual cocky demeanor replaced by something far more serious. "That was too close," he muttered, glancing at the golem's lifeless form. "What the hell was that thing?" "It was a guardian," Lyra said, her voice shaky. "It was meant to protect the secrets of Aeolus. And we just got a taste of what it was protecting." Dr. Celine and Kai joined them, both looking visibly shaken. Celine wiped sweat from her forehead, her scientific curiosity momentarily overshadowed by the realization of just how dangerous this place truly was. "We need to destroy the orb," Lyra said, her voice firmer now as she steadied herself. "If we leave it here, someone else could find it. And they might not be as lucky as we were." Kai hesitated, glancing at the glowing orb. "But the knowledge it holds, there's so much we could learn. So much that could help us. And so much that could destroy us," Celine countered. "This is exactly what happened to Aeolus. They thought they could control it, but it ended up controlling them." Terran stepped forward, his blaster still in hand. "I say we blast the thing and get out of here before the whole city collapses." Lyra nodded in agreement. She had felt the orb's power, its seductive pull, and she knew that it couldn't be trusted. No matter how tempting it was to use it for good, the risks were too great. They couldn't afford to repeat Aeolus' mistakes. With a deep breath, she approached the orb once more. This time, there was no hesitation. She raised her hand and let her magic flow into it, focusing all her energy on one goal: destruction. The orb pulsed violently, its light flickering as cracks began to form on its surface. The room trembled as the orb's power surged, and for a moment, Lyra feared that it would explode and take them all with it. But then, with a final, deafening crack, the orb shattered into 1,000 pieces, its glowing shards scattering across the floor. The trembling stopped, and the oppressive energy that had filled the chamber vanished, leaving only silence in its wake. Terran let out a breath he didn't realize he had been holding. That was intense. "We need to leave," Dr. Celine said urgently, her eyes scanning the crumbling walls. "The city's structural integrity is compromised. We don't have much time before this whole place comes down." Lyra nodded, already moving toward the exit. The others followed close behind, their footsteps quick and urgent as they navigated the labyrinth of corridors and passageways leading back to the surface. As they emerged from the pyramid and onto the platform where their airship was waiting, they could see the city around them beginning to collapse. Towers crumbled into dust, platforms broke free from their tethers, and the sky itself seemed to warp and twist as the remnants of Aeolus began to fall apart. The airship's engines roared to life as they boarded, and within moments, they were lifting off, soaring away from the doomed city. Lyra watched from the window as Aeolus, the legendary city in the sky, disintegrated into nothingness, its secrets and dangers buried forever beneath the clouds. But even as the city disappeared from view, Lyra couldn't shake the feeling that their journey wasn't truly over. Aeolus had fallen, but the temptation it represented, the allure of forbidden knowledge and power, still lingered in her mind. She knew that others would seek out such power, and that the temptation to use it for selfish purposes would never fully disappear. "We did the right thing," Kai said softly from across the cabin, as if reading her thoughts. "We saved our world from what happened to them." Lyra gave a faint smile. "I hope you're right." Terran leaned back in his seat, arms crossed over his chest, his usual grin returning. "At least we made it out in one piece. That's more than I can say for the last treasure hunt I was on." Dr. Celine shot him a disapproving look, but there was a hint of amusement in her eyes. "Let's just hope we don't run into anything like this again." Lyra leaned back in her own seat, closing her eyes for a moment as the exhaustion of the journey finally caught up with her. She didn't know what the future held, but for now, they were safe. And that was enough. As the airship drifted further away from the ruins of Aeolus, the group lapsed into a comfortable silence, each lost in their own thoughts. They had survived the city in the sky, had faced its dangers and resisted its temptations. But the world was vast, and Lyra knew that there would always be new challenges waiting just beyond the horizon, and when the time came, they would face those challenges together.